there were two laws that were enacted. In 1973, Section 504 of the Vocational Rehabilitation Act was enacted. And that was the civil rights movement sort of began to embrace the notion of people with disabilities. So that law was passed. And what it did was, it's a federal law that said that you can't discriminate against people who have a severe limitation on one or more major life activities. And the major life activity that we're concerned with in school is learning. So if people have a disability like that, an impairment, then if you take federal money, that what you have to do is be willing to accommodate, to make a reasonable accommodation for these kids to be in school. A really good way to think about Section 504 is a wheelchair ramp. So if you are able-minded but maybe not able-bodied, and if somebody can get you into a building and then you can do your job, or you can be a student and you can learn, then building a wheelchair ramp is that accommodation. That sort of levels a playing field for you. A lot of kids who have attention deficit disorder, a reasonable accommodation is some sort of a cubby, something around them. So for those kids who pay attention to everything, hopefully that reasonable accommodation will make it so the child can pay attention to the work in front of them. So we weren't yet at the point of talking about educating people with disabilities, children with disabilities, but we were talking about making it illegal to discriminate against them. So the education piece came in. Prior to 1975, if you could walk and talk and hear and see and had the capacity to learn, to read, write, and do math, you were welcome in public schools. But if you couldn't, then you weren't welcome. And parents either kept their children at home or they institutionalized them. And the same civil rights movement, they became aware of the need for the education of these children. So a lot of civil rights groups and a lot of parents filed suits, especially one in Pennsylvania, that said, okay, public school, I pay my taxes, why can't my kids go to school? And the Congress responded by enacting the Public Law 94-142, which is the Education of All Handicapped Children Act. So it's morphed into the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, IDEA. But over the years, a lot has changed, not just the name. What I told you was this was a law that was enacted to bring more kids into schools. These kids with disabilities that hadn't been allowed in school before. But what happened is very interesting because Congress, when they passed the law, said, okay, states, okay, districts, here's what you need to do. You have to go off and you have to hire all these teachers, hire the evaluators, get the professional development, make space in all your schools. That's your job because these kids are coming. And then Congress said, and here's the commitment that we will make. We will fully fund within 5 years this program. And by fully funding, what they meant was we will provide 40% of the national per pupil expenditure times the number of kids with disabilities, and we'll give you that much money over and above what you typically get. So you can see initially there was some incentive to identify children because your money that you received from the state was based on their head count. That's changed, but for the first 15 years, that was the way the money was allocated. The challenge is that 10 years after the law was enacted, the level of funding had increased to like 7.5%. Understand it was supposed to be 40. And so it increased to that much, and now it's up to maybe 18%, but it's never been fully funded. So what you have, which is words administrators hate to hear, is an unfunded mandate. You have to do this, but we haven't given you the money. And so that's sort of the evolution of it. So what happened is that kids started, it was supposed to be, let me be clear about one thing. The special education has only been enacted to provide a bridge for children to have access to the regular classroom. That's all special education is supposed to do. But what happened over the years is that we started with this one system. There's really only one system in school. And say what you will about No Child Left Behind, that certainly has made us focus on standards-based education and kids reaching the standards. But what happened, and I liken it to if you go into the housewares department of a store and you buy something that is like a vase, and it's a vase and it has like a price tag underneath, and very slowly, if you're very careful, you can peel away the price tag. So instead of just having a vase with a price tag on it, you have two separate things. And that's what happened in special education, is you had two very separate systems. The challenge there is that you can't teach kids something separately over here and think that they're going to be able to be tested on what's over here because they haven't had access to it. So that's what happened in terms of sort of understanding what went on in special education. And again, we lost sight of the fact that it's one system intended to be for all kids and intended for kids to have access to that.